Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Westside Congregation. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Wright, Service Associate. Our speaker today is the Reverend Dr. Nancy Hitt, our consulting minister. Our program today is titled, What Makes Us Real? It is based primarily on Principles 1 and 2, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. It is also founded on source number 2, words and deeds of prophetic women and men which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Our emphasis is on compassion, so all 7 principles and all 6 sources ultimately apply. We hope today's program inspires you to act in new ways. For our announcements, we have the first one being about next Sunday, the 17th of January. We're going to hold our annual general meeting at 11 a.m. via Zoom. You're going to receive a link in the mail the day before. Please do not delete it, because that's how you will get into the meeting on Sunday. The meeting will include our 2021 budget and our ballot for available positions. There are also several other issues on the agenda. The meeting will be preceded by a chalice lighting, and you will be able to participate in joys and concerns and a few other service elements before turning to the meeting. Please plan to attend either via computer or cell phone. Everyone's invited to attend and participate, but only members may vote. We have a new adult education class starting. It's entitled Living by Heart. It is a devotional spiritual practice developed by former senior minister Reverend Dr. Laurel Hallman and her mentor Harry Schofield. Living by Heart utilizes poetry and wisdom literature as a starting point and focus of mindfulness meditation. The class encourages participants to find poetry and commit passages by heart to center their thoughts and help focus internal wisdom to strengthen daily life and engagement with the world. Meetings will be the 2nd and 4th Fridays of the month and will meet on Zoom through June from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Living by Heart materials are available free for an email document or $10 for a printed copy. Contact Michelle Poiani to sign up at michelle.poiani@gmail.com. Participation will be on a first-come, first-served basis. Thank you. Please join me in the words of our chalice lighting as they appear on your screen. Our chalice flame illuminates our lives with warmth and light, showing us how to be in the world. May we embrace the truth it shows us and illuminate the world in turn. Shalom. Please join me in the words of our affirmation of our aspirations. Life is a gift. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Shalom.
I invite you now to join me in a moment for centering. Sit yourself comfortably in your seat. Put down anything you may be holding and rest your hands gently in your lap. Close your eyes if you are comfortable doing so. Turn your attention to your breathing. Breathe in deeply and fully, without pushing, just filling your lungs. And breathe out in a steady, gentle stream through your nose. Breathing in and out. Letting your mind go blank as you focus on your breath. Feel the resistance of the air as it passes through your nose. Relax in the release as you exhale. Simply breathe in and out, and revel in the pleasure of your breath. Let a small pool appear in your mind's eye, a place of beauty, safe, secure, surrounded by flowers. Perhaps small woodland creatures. Notice if there are trees nearby. Birds. Is your pool in shade or in sunshine? Are there rocks to sit on or a mossy bank? Take a few moments to relax into the comfortable beauty of your spot, to refresh yourself. Feel yourself opening comfortably into yourself as you rest by the pool. You are relaxed. You are safe. You are able to return here at any time you choose, any time you need to. Now, begin to refocus your attention on your breath, breathing your way back to the here and now in a relaxed and rested fashion. Alert, yet calm. And when you are ready, open your eyes to the present moment. Shalom. It is our custom when we gather to share our joys and concerns together. If you have a personal candle at home, you may light it whenever you wish. We will light a candle for each joy and concern we name here, as well as an additional one for those things still held in the privacy of our hearts. We light a candle of concern today for Donna and Gary Johnston. Gary's mother died this past week. Our thoughts and prayers support them. We light a candle of concern for Adriana Chard today. Adriana had what she describes as a small heart attack on her birthday 2 weeks ago. She's home after 2 days in the hospital, feeling good on new meds and bored with the pandemic. We hope her renewed health continues to be strong. We light a candle of concern for the last phases of change in our government administration, hoping that there is no more violence. We light a candle of joy for the Poyanis. Steve and Michelle are destined to become grandparents in July of this year. We share their joy and excitement at this wonderful event. We light a candle of joy that Bobby Howell's family are now able to find comfort in the memorial service offered for her. We know that Bobby would be overjoyed to be returned at last to Rio Rancho in our memorial garden here at Westside for eternity. We light a candle of joy for Carol, who will be able to return to Florida as she'd hoped to in the end of January. She has earned the rest and relaxation that will offer her. We light one last white candle for all the hopes and joys, all the struggles and sadness that we still hold in our hearts. We light this red candle in memory of the lives and in honor of the struggle of all the victims of racial violence. May we all work to free our world from this human evil. May we work to establish liberty for all the people of earth. Shalom and amen.
Today, on this desert land, we dedicate the beginning of a river of painted rocks. We call it the Peace River. May it spring forth from the earth like flowing waters, mingling our hopes, our dreams, our memories. We call upon the spirits of the land to receive our gifts, forming a channel for our thoughts and intentions. May this be a river of peace, flowing out from the heart of our congregation and touching the earth with love. Blessed be.
Hello. Patience leads to wisdom. You can't force the issue in this competitive world. You can have a fit and go nowhere, or you can sit back, reassess, and let things unfold. A demand is often met with resistance, while patience opens the door to wisdom. Now this is a little kitty, and it says, travel to far off and distant bags. Climbing around in my human's personal documents box and learning I was adopted, I guess my last name used to be Shelter. This is a big world, and no cat should go through her life without visiting as many bags and boxes as she can. And to challenge your comfort zone, try to fit in a box that's too small. Also, see if you can fit in the child's human backpack. You might find a salty potato chip at the bottom. And by all means, don't go through life without sitting in both colors of the laundry basket. How else will you know if the socks in the light one are just as comfortable as the warm towels in the blue one? It's not true that curiosity killed the cat. That's just a rumor spread by other cats who don't want you to know what's inside the unraveled sleeping bag in the closet.
Our moment for all ages this morning is a series of stories. They are all about compassion. No two of them are alike, so listen closely to hear what some of the possibilities for compassion could be in your life. Here is the first story. When the supermarket clerk tallied up my groceries, I was $12 over what I had on me. I began to remove items from the bags when another shopper handed me a $20 bill. "Please don't put yourself out," I told him. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "My mother is in the hospital with cancer. I visit her every day and bring her flowers. I went this morning and she got mad at me for spending money on more flowers. She demanded that I do something else with that money. So here, please accept this. It is my mother's flowers." Compassion is not always about giving a concrete gift. Sometimes it's about accepting the gifts of others. Here is the second story. My neighbor, Jim, had trouble deciding if he wanted to retire from the construction field until he ran into a younger man he'd worked with previously. The young man had a wife and 3 children and was finding it difficult to make ends meet since he hadn't worked in some time. The next morning, Jim went to the union office and submitted his retirement paperwork. As for his replacement, he gave them the name of the young man. That was 6 years ago, and the young husband and father has been employed ever since. Sometimes compassion is more about getting out of the way than about doing bold things. Here is the third story. A couple, whom we shall call John and Mary, had a nice home and 2 lovely children, a boy and a girl. John had a good job and had just been asked to go on a business trip to another city and would be gone for several days. It was decided that Mary needed an outing and would go along too. They hired a reliable woman to care for the children and made the trip, returning home a little earlier than they had planned. As they drove into their hometown, feeling glad to be back, they noticed smoke, and they went off their usual route to see what it was. They found a home in flames. Mary said, "Oh, well, it isn't our fire. Let's go home." But John drove closer and exclaimed, "That home belongs to Fred Jones, who works at the plant. He wouldn't be off work yet. Maybe there's something we could do." "It has nothing to do with us," protested Mary. "You have your good clothes on. Let's not get any closer." But John drove up and stopped, and they were both horror-stricken to see the whole house in flames. A woman on the lawn was in hysterics, screaming, "The children! Get the children!" John grabbed her by the shoulder, saying, "Where are they? Tell me where the children are." "In the basement," sobbed the woman, "down the hall and to the left." In spite of Mary's protests, John grabbed the water hose and soaked his clothes, put his wet handkerchief on his head, and bolted for the basement, which was full of smoke and scorching hot. He found the door and grabbed 2 children, holding one under each arm like the football player he had been. As he left, he could hear more whimpering. He delivered the 2 badly frightened and nearly suffocated children into waiting arms and filled his lungs with fresh air and started back, asking how many more children were down there. They told him 2 more, and Mary grabbed his arm and screamed, "John, don't go! It's suicide! That house will cave any second!" But he shook her off and went back, feeling his way down the smoke-filled hallway and into the room. It seemed an eternity before he found both children and started back. They were all 3 coughing, and he stooped low to get what available air he could. As he stumbled up the endless steps, the thought went through his mind that there was something strangely familiar about the little bodies clinging to him. And at last, when they came out into the sunlight and fresh air, he found that he had just rescued his own children. Their babysitter had left them at her friend's house while she did some shopping. Sometimes compassion is the best proof we have of the interconnectedness of all life. Here is the last story. A little girl was late coming home for supper. Her mother made the expected irate parent's demand to know where had she been. The little girl replied that she had stopped to help Janie, whose bicycle had broken in a fall. "But you don't know anything about fixing bicycles," her mother responded. "I know that," the little girl said. "I just stopped to help her cry." Not many of us know anything about fixing bicycles either. And when our friends have fallen and broken, not their bicycles, but their lives, none of us knows how to fix that. We simply cannot fix someone else's life, even though that's what we would most like to do. But like that little girl, we can stop to help them cry. Sometimes that is the best that we can do, and that is a lot. That is compassion. Blessed be.
Thank you again for continuing to support our Westside congregation. It is good to be able to report that we are financially solvent as we exit the last fiscal year. This is all due to your efforts. Because of you, we are able to look forward to 2021, even though it is not yet clear whether it will be another video year or if we'll be able to gather in person. It may be a mixture of both. Whatever 2021 brings, we look forward to sharing it with you. Thank you.
Our reading today is number 658 in our own hymnal. It is titled "To Risk," and the author is anonymous. It goes like this. To laugh is to risk appearing the fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out for another is to risk exposing our true self. To place our ideas, our dreams, before the crowd is to risk loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. To live is to risk dying. I titled this sermon, "What Makes Us Real?" I can't quite decide whether to put a question mark at the end of that phrase or not. I want to ask the question, what makes us real? But I also want to respond to it, to be able to say, here, this is what makes us real. So I'm inviting you to risk a journey with me and reflect on both how we ask this question and how we respond to it. Kathy told you right off at the start of the service that we'd be focusing primarily on compassion today. We're going to focus on asking what compassion is and on exploring how to respond with compassion. I expect you could see this in the stories that we read together. Each one of them illustrated some of the similarities of compassion and also some of the differences. The similarity among them illustrates the dictionary definition of compassion. In each story, one of the people had strong feelings of sadness and concern for someone else who was in distress. The particular circumstances differed, making the compassionate response unique in each instance. One person accepted money they otherwise wouldn't have. One person retired specifically so someone else could have a job. Another person made a heroic rescue of 4 children from a burning building, only to discover that 2 of them were his own. That's a karmic riddle I'd hate to see work out any other way. And the last person simply cried with the person in distress, recognizing that sharing tears and the sadness the other was feeling was good for both of them. Sometimes "I helped her cry" is the most compassionate response possible. Any one of us hearing any of these stories is likely to label the hero, the heroine, as compassionate. When it comes to compassion, we know it when we are in its presence. But just to be crystal clear, our dictionaries define compassion as, and I quote, "sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others that includes the desire to relieve the suffering." End quote. It's that last phrase, the one about the desire to relieve suffering, that sets compassion aside from other feelings. Sadness and sympathy, empathy even, are feelings that an individual can experience in regard to the plight of someone else. But even the empathetic person can walk away, horrified at the pain they have just witnessed, but without making a personal response to it. We'd like to think that it's hard to do that. But if the suffering of the world is any witness at all, it's apparently much easier than we'd like it to be. More often than we'd like to admit, we find ourselves overwhelmed by the pain of others. Yet we manage to move on, to get over it, to separate ourselves from it. So, sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others, while noble sounding in and of themselves, are not enough to make a difference. In fact, people often become quite skilled at blocking that out because it's painful to be constantly aware of pain and suffering, even when it is not our own. So we build buffers around our hearts and feel sincere sadness and regret, but we get over it. Compassion doesn't get over it. Compassion doesn't think we should get over it. Compassion wants to fix it, to relieve the pain. It is the second part of the definition, the part that says compassion includes the desire to relieve the suffering, that makes all the difference. At its zenith, compassion includes the desire to prevent suffering before it even happens. The stories of the world are full of the adventures of heroes and heroines who must overcome suffering in order to achieve some kind of special status. Sometimes those are called hero myths. There are often 3 challenges that the heroine must overcome before winning whatever the desired prize is. Such people seem bigger than life, somehow bolder, more courageous, smarter, more creative than ordinary people. Often, by the end of the story, the heroine has earned a position of leadership over other people who haven't mastered the challenges and survived the suffering that they have. Down through the ages, people have looked for examples to guide them through the difficulties of life. And who better to do that than someone who has been through it all and survived the suffering without losing a valuable part of themselves in the process? Coming out the other side of suffering is often perceived to bestow wisdom on a person. Now, this only works if the heroine has resisted the temptation to be self-centered, manipulative, deceitful, and cruel in the process of working out their own success. If instead they've increased the suffering of those around them, then there is nothing admirable about them. Pretty much anyone can do that. True magic consists in eliminating pain and suffering. I want us to think about 5 people today, some only very briefly, so that we can identify what it is that makes people real. We'll start small, literally, with Pinocchio. Do you remember Geppetto's wooden puppet? Geppetto was a lonely carpenter who wished that the puppet he had made could be a real boy. Pinocchio has a dream in which the blue fairy tells him that in order to be a real boy, he must be brave, truthful, and unselfish. Well, probably everybody remembers that Pinocchio has a problem with the truth because his nose grows with every lie, and his nose gets very long indeed. At one point, it even sprouts leaves and a bird's nest. Pinocchio doesn't do very well with the business of becoming real for quite a while. He fails a lot of challenges and meets up with terrible consequences before he finally works things out. And Disney being Disney, we are eventually given a happy ending in which Pinocchio has finally proven himself to be brave, truthful, and unselfish, and is deemed worthy of being real, which makes Geppetto a very happy man. I should tell you that the original story was much darker than that. It was a cautionary tale in which Pinocchio was executed for his horrible behavior. Disney had his finger on the pulse of modern times when he rewrote the ending to reflect more recent values. By the 1940s, when Disney's Pinocchio came out, it was no longer enough to try and scare children into being good. We had recognized that fear did not motivate people half as well as healthy examples. You see, more than anything, Pinocchio wanted to make Geppetto happy. He wanted to relieve his loneliness. And that's compassion. Lots of noteworthy people have had something to say about compassion. Gandhi is credited with observing, and I quote, "True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring." End quote. That draws a distinct line between charity and compassion. There are elements of each in the other, but charity and compassion are not identical. Gandhi is renowned for his nonviolence and wisdom in helping people to free themselves from oppression. He knew that charity was only a very small step to the compassionate end of liberation. Here's another quick story about Gandhi. As he stepped on board a train one day, one of his shoes slipped off and landed on the track. He was unable to retrieve it as the train was moving. To the amazement of his companions, Gandhi calmly took off his other shoe and threw it back along the track to land close to the first one. Asked by a fellow passenger why he did so, Gandhi smiled. "The poor man who finds the shoes lying on the track," he replied, "will now have a pair he can use." One of the people Gandhi admired was Jesus. Jesus was a first-century Jew who insisted on speaking truth to power even when it cost him his life. Jesus inverted the social structure on its head, teaching the dregs of society, the have-nots in every sense of the term, that they were as beloved by God as those with wealth and privilege. It made him wildly unpopular with powerful people, but he insisted on liberating people from socio-cultural chains anyway. He fed them, he healed them, he spoke to common people with respect and dignity. He treated them as if they were real and really mattered. After Jesus' death, people continued to experience him as real, not because of a reputation for military might or personal prowess, but because of his compassion, as evident to them in his death as in his life. An ancient and mostly female deity who is known as the goddess of compassion, or sometimes mercy, is Kwan Yin. You will have seen her on the table in front of me here. In some times and places, Kwan Yin is male. Most often now, she is either androgynous or female. Kwan Yin is very present in a large part of the world. She is a Buddhist bodhisattva. Her Chinese name means the one who hears the sounds of the world. As the goddess of compassion, it is the cries of suffering that she hears and responds to. One Buddhist legend presents Kwan Yin as vowing to never rest until she had freed all sentient beings from samsara, or the cycle of rebirth. Despite strenuous effort, she realized that there were still many unhappy beings yet to be saved. After struggling to comprehend the needs of so many, her head split into 11 pieces. The Buddha, Amitabha, upon seeing her plight, gave her 11 heads to help her hear the cries of those who are suffering. Upon hearing these cries and comprehending them, Kwan Yin attempted to reach out to all those who needed aid, but found that her 2 arms shattered into pieces. Once more, Amitabha came to her aid and gave her 1,000 arms to help her reach out to those in need. Another story describes Kwan Yin as the daughter of a cruel father who wanted her to marry a wealthy but uncaring man. She begged to be able to enter a temple and become a nun instead. Her father allowed her to work in the temple, but asked the monks to give her very hard chores in order to discourage her. The monks forced Kwan Yin to work all day and all night, while others slept, in order to finish her work. However, she was such a good person that the animals living around the temple began to help her with her chores. Her father, seeing this, became so frustrated that he attempted to burn down the temple. Kwan Yin put out the fire with her bare hands and suffered no burns. Now struck with fear, her father ordered her to be put to death. After she died, she was made into a goddess for all of her kindness and began her journey to heaven. She was about to cross over into heaven when she heard a cry of suffering back on earth. She asked to be sent back and vowed to stay until all suffering had ended. To stay in the midst of suffering, working to relieve it so others may have peace in their lives. That is compassion. Kwan Yin had earned heaven and turned her back on it to help others. In addition to being the goddess of compassion, she is regarded as the patron of mothers and children, of sailors, and of vegetarianism. Kwan Yin is often recognized as the most well-loved Buddhist deity. People love her because she first loved them. I've given us an odd list of compassionate figures so far. Pinocchio, Gandhi, Jesus, Kwan Yin. And the last one I'd like us to consider is Martin Luther King, Jr. In another week or so, we will be focusing as a nation on the changes he helped bring into being to throw off the oppression of racism. I want us to think about him because he is timely in many ways. The issues of racism, systemic and personal oppression and racial violence are still with us, but they are no longer hidden. They are no longer masquerading as normal or defensible. They are clearly labeled evil through and through. The mobilizing person in that work that has achieved that is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. There is no patina of history to soften the edges of MLK or lend him supernatural powers. He is from our own time. There is nothing he did that another person, that you or that I, could not also have done. The thing is, he is the one who devoted himself to relieving the suffering of racism. We can wonder about all sorts of aspects of his life. We can critique and expound and second-guess him after the fact. But we cannot avoid the truth that this individual man operated from a core of compassion. And if he could do it, we can too. 60 years ago, the civil rights movement forced Americans to have serious and difficult conversations about race. King argued that, and I quote, "returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars," end quote. In the tragically growing legacy of the deaths of Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, and so many others, it is worth remembering that at the heart of the civil rights movement is compassion. We're not through with the conversations King started, but compassion demands that we continue to have them. I said today that I wanted to ask the question, what makes us real? And I wanted to respond to it. The question underlies every story I've told you, as does the response. There's no trick answer. There's no hidden agenda. It's very simple and straightforward. Even children grasp it. If we want to be accepted and regarded as real, as genuine human beings, we need to be compassionate. Suffering with others and working to relieve our common distress is what matters. Here's one last story to sum it up for you. There was once a devout Buddhist man. He worked very hard to feed his family. He worked even harder to fulfill his dream. He dreamed of printing a book of Buddhist sutras. It would take more money than he had, so he scrimped and saved so that he someday could print this precious book for people. After a number of years, he finally had enough money. He was so excited. But as he was counting out his savings, the levee broke. Water flooded his town. People were ruined. The man calmly took his money and paid for food and supplies for the people. Eventually, the town was stable again, and the man saved his money again. He still wanted to publish the important book. After another period of years, the man had again saved his money. He was ready to pay to publish the beautiful book. As he was counting out his money, wildfire swept through the town. People were injured and hungry and had no homes. The man calmly paid for whatever they needed and brought it to them with his money. People healed. They rebuilt the town. Many years later, the man had again saved up the money he needed to print the book of sutras. He commissioned the woodcuts. They were magnificent. The books were made, 500 of them. The man felt good that so many people could read the beautiful sutras and learn how to live. He paid for the books and began to travel, handing out the books as he went. It had taken him a long time, but he had finally finished the work of his life. The people in his town agreed that yes, the book he had paid to publish was wonderful, very helpful. They said the first 2 editions were even better. And the moral of the story is that how we live is what makes us real, or not. Your choice. Shalom. Now, as always, we invite you yet again to respond to this program. Questions, comments, suggestions, all are welcome. It really helps the team that works to put this together to have your feedback. You may leave your contribution on any of our websites, or you may email me directly. Thank you. I invite you now to pay attention to the words on your screen as we come to extinguishing our chalice. The light and the warmth of our chalice flame still linger in our hearts, moving us to reach out, to nurture, to support the people in our lives. In the absence of the flame, may we be the change. Shalom and amen. May your life make you real in the ways you value most. May the mirror of your heart reveal the connections of a lifetime. May you be a part of incarnating love in the world. Blessed be.